There was once a man named Bolu Sharp, a bride with wide blazing eyes and the kind of big eyes that made children think twice before knocking at their door. He lived in a burnt house with his long-suffering wife, Bossy. Bolu had once been a carpenter, a good one. His hands were rough like bark but steady. He built furniture that looked like it had grown strength out of the earth. But one day something snapped inside of him. Some said it happened during church revival. Others says he simply hit his head on the plank. Either way, from that day, Bolu refused to walk. Walk, he said, standing in the center of the living room in a stone plain robe, arms raised to the cracked ceiling. My work is of the spirit. My labor is divine. And then he burst into a storm of untellable syllables. Yakabore terebo, Yandara sata. Ruth will just sigh, roll her eyes, and go outside to the garden. Someone had to put food on the table. At first, neighbors were delighted. They passed by and heard the babbling through the window like a broken radio station. People stopped sharing his yard or asking for help fixing their fence. Bolu sat on his spoiled couch for hours, speaking in tongues, waving at cars, and declaring to anyone he saw, I do the Lord's work. These speaking in tongues of mine, they changed lives. However, nothing changed. The garden didn't weed itself. The leaking roof only got worse. And Bossy was growing tired. No morning passed by without him seated across the sagging couch, blankets tangled around his leg like a wrap. The sun climbed higher, yet Bolu's eyes remained shut, his mouth whispering strange and mysterious sound of speaking in tongues that filled the silent house with strange music no one understood. The dishes piled up in the sink, thick with dry stew, and coffee rings as if they were little memorial to his neglect. Bossy will glance at the growing mountain with a tight teeth, sighing as she scrubbed each plate herself. Outside, the grass was wide, reaching nearly new. Higher weed strangled the vegetable garden, choking tomatoes and squeezed alike the fence, subside, scattered and falling apart. However, Bolu never moved to fix it. Maybe the Lord will fix it for us, he said one afternoon, sitting on the spoiled couch with his eyes closed, hand raised as if he was holding the word in prayer. Bossy looked at him, arms crossed. The Lord help those who help themselves. Bolu, right now you are not helping anything. His laziness wasn't just physical, it was a heavy fog that settled over his spirit. When Bossy asked him to do some tasks like cutting firewood, feeding the chickens, or paying bills, he replied, Madumakporo Zodo, and retreat back to his chair. Neighbors stopped visiting. Children no longer dared to knock on his door. The mailbox overflowed with unpaid bills and unopened letters. One time a friend came by hoping to borrow Bolu's tools for a quick repair. Bolu just sat silent, shouting softly, refusing to lend a happy hand. His friend says, praying won't fix a broken fence. You got to do the work. Bolu smiled faintly, but replied softly, the tongues are my labors. However, But she knew better. She saw the pain behind his laziness, the fear, maybe the pride that kept him from facing hard work again. She saw a man hiding from the world in words that no one understood, refused to lift a finger, and yet expecting praise for spiritual work. That never changed a thing. One rainy afternoon, when Bolu sat inside speaking in tongues and Posi was soaked from trying to fix a leaking window herself, she lost her patience that day. Enough! She shouted, slamming her hand on the table. If speaking in tongues is the work you want, then speak in tongues while you walk, because the roof is leaking, the garden is dying, and the house is falling apart. Bolu blinked, scared. The fire in her eyes was something he hasn't seen in years. One evening, after a long day, drag firewood and patching the chicken cage, Bossy stepped into the house dripping with sweat. Bolu stood in the middle of the living room, eyes closed, arm in the air, chanting again. Shakata, Karamo, Didi, Yaranda. Bossy dropped the firewood with a loud smash. However, Bolu didn't flinch. She walked in, beat the coffee table with her palm. Bolu sharp. You listen to me. You think speaking in tongues is work? Real work puts bread on the table, not hot air in the room. Bolu opened his eyes. Woman, you mock the holy language of the Lord? No, she replied, I mock laziness. Bossy snapped, rolling up her sleeves. Bolu, if you are so convinced that your tongue switch is powerful, let's put it to the test. Bolu turned his head. What did you mean? She smiled, that naughty, nonsense smile that Bolu had once fallen in love with, back when she dared him to milk a wild goat with nothing but a shoelace. I mean, she grabbed his arm. You are going to speak in tongues at everything that needs fixing in this house, starting now. But she didn't wait for Bolu to agree. She dragged him by the elbow towards the back door, like a mother dragging a stubborn child to school. First, stop, she said, pointing to the chicken cage. The doors are falling off. So let's see what your only language can do about that. Bolu wrinkled his nose. The cage? That is below my calling. Bossy folded her arms. Then maybe you like to sleep in that cage tonight. He murmured as he stepped closer to the scattered door, raised his hands and began his sermon to the bells. Yadabo, Shotototo, Ramada. The chickens stared at him. One screamed and bit his hand. Kick the door to the wind. How is it? Bossy asked. I believe, Bolu said, turning slowly. The spirit is moving. The healing is in progress. Bossy shook her head, then tossed him a hammer. It smashed into his chest. No spirit is gonna help if your hands won't fix it. While the chickens watching him like feathers judge, Bolu spent the next 30 minutes fumbling with the hammer, bending nails, swearing, briefly then apologized to the sky and murmured, half-heart, speaking in tongues with every failed attempt. Tarabasha, whoa, shankando. When the door finally hung well straight, Bossy nodded. Better. Next is the roof. Bolu looked up at the house like it was Mount Sinai. You want me to climb? He asked. You said tongues could move mountain, she replied. Hand him a ladder. Let's see if they can fix a leaking roof. Bolu started quoting scriptures under his breath. Bolu climbed. Up there he waved with tar paper, speaking scared to the woods and nearly fell off twice. He waved his arm dramatically at the patch of moss like he was casting out a demon. Moss, be gone in the name of Shalabala. By the time he came down, he was covered in sweat, dust, and dropping. Bossy handed him a glass of lemon. As Bolu grabbed down the lemon, breathing like a dog in the desert. Bossy walked over with a slipboard. It had a list, a long list. He collected it and asked, "What is this?" Bossy replied, "Your divine assignment. Since you have got so much fire in that tongue of yours, it is time to spread it around the house." Bolu blinked. "But I just finished fixing the roof." "That was your warm-up. Come on, prophet, time to see if your tongue can repair the sink." She marched inside. Bolu stared at the sky. "Why have you forsaken me?" he whispered. Then, dragging his aching legs, he followed. Inside the kitchen, Popsy was waiting with a pool. "The pipes has been blocked for 3 weeks," she said. "I figure if tongue can cast out demons, then it can surely cast out these deities." Then Bolu muttered, "You are enjoying this too much." Then she handed him the pool. The Lord loved cheerful givers. He knelt, speaking in tongues louder this time, as if volume would frighten the grim into obedience. Shalabala, Yonto, Rakada, follow. Nothing happened. Bossy crossed her arms and said, trying speaking in lefty, loosey rightly, tightly. With a groan, Bolu twisted the pipe, and it promptly sprinkled him in the face with 3 weeks worth of disgusting smell. Dirty. Bossy didn't laugh. She didn't have to, but the quiet said it all. She handed him a rag and struck his shoulder. "There is glory in the Lord, prophet. Still thinking speaking in tongues is enough by itself?" Bolu wiped his forehead. "The tongue is mighty." Bossy raised an eyebrow. "But the armor is not bad either," he admitted. "That is more like it," Bossy said. However, she wasn't done. She took him to the garden, where weeds had wrapped themselves around the tomatoes like greedy serpents. Bolu sighed, knelt down, and began muttering his scared syllables as he pulled out root after root. "Karabosha, this one is really stubborn." Staggering, falling, and standing up. 4 hours passed. The sun dipped low. Bolu, who was once so proud of his calling, now hobbled into the house with a dirty on his cheeks and a new respect in his eyes. That night, Bossy prepared a surprise. She cleared the garage, set a mind-shift prayer and workstation, and hanged a wooden sign above it. Dear read, "Faith without work is dead." James chapter 2 verse 17. Bolu stared at it for a long time. He read that verse 100 times, but it never hit him like it did now. With insensitive ends, aching nails, and the scent of zinc juice still clinging to his head. Percy had made stew. As he sat down, she slid a bowl in front of him. Eat, you have earned it. He looked at her, his finger bleeding, his back aching, and asked, "Why didn't you stop me sooner?" She struggled. Sometimes people got to find the truth in the sweat. You thought tongues alone were powerful, but words without work, they are just noise. Bolu stared at the stew. "So what now?" he asked. Percy stepped beside him. "I married a good man, but somewhere along the way, you decided your mouth could do the heavy lifting. The truth is, Bolu, I never minded your tongues, but I missed your hand." His throat tightened. "You are right," he said. I I hide behind the words. It felt easier to sound holy than to be useful. Percy rested her head on his shoulder. Holiness isn't loud. It is quiet. It is fixing what is broken, carrying what is heavy, being there especially when it is hard. He kissed her forehead. "You have taught me more with hammer than I ever learned in a pulpit." And that night, Bolu didn't just speak in tongues, he prayed along in English, honesty, trembling words. Then he set his alarm for 5 a.m. The next morning, Percy woke up, find him around, dressed in overall, sweeping the front floor. "You are up early," she said, stretching her body. He looked up, smiled. "Did the Lord spoke?" she asked, itching an eyeball. Bolu blinked. "The Lord said, 'Get your lazy butt moving before your wife teach you another lesson.'" They both laughed loud, a deep, healing laugh. And from that day, Bolu changed. Thank you for watching this story. Kindly share your thoughts with me in the comment section. What lesson did you learn from this story? Share this story with your loved ones and please subscribe if you've not done so until I bring another story your way. Bye.